God's Word comes to us from 2 Corinthians chapter 8, 1 through 15. Typical of the Apostle Paul, he could have said all this in, 3 sentences? Possibly? Maybe 4. But we don't have him there. We want you to know, brothers and sisters, about the grace of God that has been granted to the churches of Macedonia. For during a severe ordeal of affliction, their abundant joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For as I can testify, they voluntarily gave according to their means, even beyond their means, begging us earnestly for the privilege of sharing in this ministry to the saints. And this not merely as we expected, they gave themselves first to the Lord, and by the will of God, to us, so that we might urge Titus that, as he had already made a beginning, so he should also complete this generous undertaking among you. Now as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in utmost eagerness, and in our love for you, so we want you to excel also in this generous undertaking. I do not say this as a command, but I am testing the genuineness of your love against the earnestness of others. For you know the generous act of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. And in this matter I am giving you my advice. It is appropriate for you who began last year not only to do something, but even to desire to do something. Now finish doing it, so that your eagerness may be matched by completing it according to your means. For if by the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. I do not mean that there should be relief for others and pressure on you, but it is a question of a fair balance between your present abundance and their need, so that their abundance may be for your need, in order that there may be a fair balance. As it is written, the one who had much did not have too much, and the one who had little did not have too little.
The call came over the airport loudspeaker. If anyone near gate 4A speaks Arabic, please come immediately. Naomi Nahabi Nai said she was walking around the airport and suddenly realized that was her gate. So she turned and rushed back, and when she went into the gate, she noticed a Palestinian woman in full Palestinian garb in a heap on the floor, wailing and crying. And the attendant at the gate said, "Can you help? Can you help? Please help!" We've been going through 2 Corinthians for the last several weeks, and for some of you, the good news is only 2 more weeks, this Sunday and next Sunday, and we won't do 2 Corinthians for a little while. Maybe give it a week or 2 rest, and then we'll come back to it. Somebody told me this morning, "John, I read 2 Corinthians twice. Didn't help me a bit." Okay. And today, I mean, you were trying to listen to that. I've read it before, this section, several times. And as I sat there and listened again just now, I thought, what in the world's going on here? Short synopsis. Paul is writing to the church at Corinth. He had an antagonistic relationship with them. It was difficult. They were upset with him, he was upset with them, and they were fussing and arguing with each other. One of the issues they had is they said, some of these other folks are really super apostles, and Paul, you don't amount to much because you've been in prison, you've been beaten, you really don't speak very well, and frankly, you don't look so good either. And Paul was saying to them, well, you know, some of your behavior is really not very good. Now Paul is trying to appeal to them and say, well, I want to give you a little test. You see, your sisters and brothers in Macedonia, they've been blessed, but they've also gone through some really tough times. And we asked them to help us support the saints, the church in Jerusalem. And they gave generously. Now it's your turn. He said, you started this a year ago. Now, come on. You got mad at me and you stopped giving. Now, let's start again. And then he goes in to this statement about income equality. You thought this was something new? No. Paul made this up a long time ago, income equality. He talks about the blessings of God and said God has blessed everyone and we are invited to share. Our God is a God of abundance. I think we have to figure out what we understand about God in order to decide how to share. As I see it, we have two basic problems with sharing. One is, if we have a lot, we sometimes find it difficult to give, or at least to give enough. I mean, if we have a superabundance, we may say, well, I'll give a little bit, and yet maybe we ought to be giving a little bit more. We got that nagging in the back of our head, I gave them $5 and I could have given 50 and it wouldn't have made any difference. But then we have a second problem. When we need help, whether it be affirmation, support, love, or for heaven's sakes, if we happen to need some financial help, it's very difficult for us to ask. Which one of those is a greater problem? I don't know. But I think we need to step back and understand God is the God of abundance. And God wants to bless each and all of us and everybody. So if we have plenty, we can share. If we have a need, we can ask. But both of those are really hard. God is a God of abundance. Look at the creativity of God. God created, in the beginning, God created, gave Adam and Eve this beautiful garden and said, everything is yours, enjoy, experience it, live life to the fullest. Just don't eat that tree of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil right there in the middle of the garden. Everything else, perfectly fine. Our God is a God of abundance. God created so much. We have millions of different kinds of plants. We have animals of all varieties. We have people all over the place. Walk down this hall. We got stuff. God is a God of abundance. We have lots of stuff down there. And I imagine we got stuff in our houses we could bring down here and not miss it for 4 or 5 years. I heard the day before yesterday that there are 33,000, I don't think it's even, but around 33,000 different species of fish in the ocean. 33,000 different species of fish in the ocean. Now that's abundance. We have stories of God's abundance. Elijah goes to a widow. He says, there's a drought in my country, and God sent me to you. I'd like some bread. And she said, well, I got a little bit of meal, a little oil, but that's it. Once we eat it, it's all gone. Elijah said, don't worry about it. God will provide. And for the entire time of the drought, there was always enough meal, always enough oil for them to have bread. Jesus went to a wedding one time. They came to him and said, we're out of wine. He said, don't worry about it. And they had enough wine that everybody celebrated, maybe all night long and into the next day. One time there was a huge crowd. The disciples said, we need to feed these folks. Well, what do you got? Well, we got some loaves of bread and a couple of fish. And Jesus said, that's plenty, isn't it? Blessed it, broke it up, gave it to the crowd. They collected leftovers. Our God is a God of abundance. The reference in 2 Corinthians where it says the one who had much didn't have too much, the one who had little didn't have too little, is about when the children of Israel were wandering around in the wilderness. And they were hungry. And they said, God, we need food. And God gave them manna. And when they collected it, if they collected way too much, they simply had enough to feed themselves. And if they didn't collect quite enough, they had plenty. Always enough. God is the God of abundance and provides for us all the time. Please don't mishear me. I'm not suggesting there are not difficulties in our life. There are. There are not struggles in life. There are. But the basic understanding we need to have is God is a God of abundance. And yet I'm always trying to limit God. Well, I'm not sure we're really going to be able to make it. Is it really going to be enough? And I hear other people in my world trying to limit God and say, well, unless you act like this, believe like this, behave like this, God's not going to love you. Where did we get this notion we can somehow limit God and limit God's love? We even put these restrictions on God and say, well, I understand that we need to love and accept everybody, but they're different than me. They have a different religion. They have different colored skin. They act differently. They vote differently. They think differently. Maybe God is not on their side. I always go back to that little story Jesus said, when it rains on those who do justice and those who don't do justice equally. I mean, it doesn't go around and nice little rain showers raining on everybody else, and here I go walking down the street and there's no rain around me. Oh, John hasn't been very nice, has he? And when it doesn't rain on all of us. Just alike. My temptation is always try to say, how can I fix this? How can I do some big thing that's going to dramatically impact the lives of the people I know, this church, this community, this state, this nation, this world, this universe? I always want the big fix. And yet, I know that God and God's abundance is always about multiplying the small little acts of kindness and love that we do. This story of Naomi Shahid Nye. She'd gone to the Albuquerque airport to fly to El Paso, Texas. She was told her flight was delayed 4 hours. She was walking up and down the concourse when she heard this plea over the loudspeaker. If anybody speaks Arabic, please come to gate 4A. And that's my gate, she said. Now, Miss Nye is from Ferguson, Missouri. You've heard of that little town, haven't you? Ferguson, Missouri. That's where she's from. She's a Palestinian American. Her father came from Palestine. Her mother is American. She grew up in Ferguson, been back and forth to the Middle East many times because her father is a journalist. She's a poet. She's just on Being with Krista Tippett. This week's episode. I haven't listened to it yet. Everybody listen to On Being with Krista Tippett podcast. I recommend it. On Being. O-N-B-E-I-G. Great Krista Tippett. But she went in to the gate and she saw this woman in full Palestinian dress, crumpled on the floor, wailing. The attendant said, "Can you help?" And she went over, And she said she doesn't speak Arabic very well, but when the woman heard a couple of words she recognized Arabic, she stopped crying. And eventually, Miss Nye found out that when they told her the flight was delayed, she thought it was canceled. And she needed to be in El Paso for medical treatment early the next morning. And she thought she was going to miss it. Miss Nye began to talk to her and said, well, who's going to meet you? Well, her son was going to meet her. So she got her number and they called the woman's son. She said, I talked to him in English, assured him I was with his mother, let him talk to his mother, told him that since we were flying Southwest, I could sit with her on the flight. I'd make sure she got there. And it looked like everything's going to be okay. And then she asked if they had more children, and she said, well, she had 3 other sons. So she said, well, let's call them. We got plenty of time. So they called the other sons. And then she said, well, she decided, well, let's call my dad. So her dad and the woman visited in Arabic for quite some time, chatting with each other. And in the course of conversation, they found out they knew 10 of the same people. And then Miss Nye said, well, I think I'll call some of my Palestinian poet friends. And so she called them up and let the woman chat with her. She said before long, the woman was relaxed and laughing and patting my knee as she told the story about her life. And she reached into her bag and pulled out some marmol cookies. M-A-M-O-O-L. Marmol. Never heard of them. But they're a cookie filled with dates and nuts and covered in powdered sugar. She pulled out these homemade cookies and began passing them out to all the women gathered at the gate. And one of the most impressive lines that Miss Nye writes is, she said, I was so surprised. Not one woman refused a cookie. The mom from California, the Australian woman traveling through the United States, the dressed to the nines woman from Laredo. They all took a cookie. She said it was like a sacrament. And before long, everybody was covered with powdered sugar. Miss Nye says, this can happen again and again. Simply recognizing God is a God of abundant mercy, love, compassion, goodness, and grace. And be willing to share, not merely with each other, not merely for those who deserve it, or who like us, but across cultures, across religions, across different understandings, different faith traditions, different belief systems. God is God of abundant love. May we trust in that abundant love in our lives, for the lives of all. Amen.